Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. In these videos I just talk about the books that I've been reading recently, and I've got a good stack in front of me, so let's just dive straight into it. I wanted a nice light-hearted, funny comfort read, and so I reached for P.G. Wodehouse, and this is Thank You Jeeves, which is the first full-length Jeeves and Wooster novel that he wrote. This was written in 1934, first published in 1934, and it was brilliant. It was exactly what I wanted. It was funny, it was lighthearted, the writing is amazing, and I'm definitely going to be reading more of Jeeves and Wooster. I also have some of the Blanding series, which I haven't read any of yet, but I'm also looking forward to that. So in this particular one, Thank You Jeeves, we have right off the top, Jeeves resigns because Bertie won't give up practicing. What is it that he's got? An instrument, a banjo, that he won't give up practicing, and so Jeeves resigns. And then it goes from there, and it is just utterly brilliant. I also thought I was going to read some of the reviews on here because I'm not the only one who thinks this is a brilliant book. And some of the reviews are really interesting. So on the front, there's a review by Hugh Laurie, who played Wooster in a TV adaptation of these books. The funniest writer ever to put words to paper. And then on the back is Stephen Fry, who played Jeeves in that same adaptation. You don't analyze such sunlit perfection, you just bask in its warmth and splendor. So that's already high praise indeed, but then there is some more here in the front. Marion Keyes says, the ultimate in comfort reading because nothing bad ever happens in P.G. Wodehouse land. Or even if it does, it's always sorted out by the end of the book. For as long as I'm immersed in a P.G. Wodehouse book, it's possible to keep the real world at bay and live in a far, far nicer, funnier one where happy endings are the order of the day. And then Lynn Truss, who I've been really enjoying her Constable Twitten books, she said, you should read Wodehouse when you're well and when you're poorly, when you're traveling and when you're not, when you're feeling clever and when you're feeling utterly dim. Wodehouse always lifts your spirits, no matter how high they happen to be already. I liked that too. Julian Fellows says, P.G. Wodehouse remains the greatest chronicler of a certain kind of Englishness, sorry, that no one else has ever captured quite so sharply or with quite as much wit and affection. There's a bunch more, but then I thought this one was really interesting from Simon Callow. I've recorded all the Jeeves books, and I can tell you this, it's like singing Mozart. The perfection of the phrasing is a physical pleasure. I doubt if any writer in the English language has more perfect music. Wow, right? I mean, that's just amazing. Simon Brett, who writes mysteries and at one time was the president of the Detection Club, writes, I constantly find myself drooling with admiration at the sublime way Wodehouse plays with the English language. Yeah. So if you've never tried P.G. Wodehouse, give it a try. It is excellent writing and just really funny. Okay, and then I read a novella as part of the Inspector Chopra series by Vaseem Khan. This is Inspector Chopra and the $1 Million Motor Car. So it's just a quick little, like I said, novella. It's 87 pages, and in this one, Inspector Chopra gets asked to find a luxury car that goes missing from the garage where it is being worked on. And again, I just loved delving again into this world with these characters. You know, his elephant Ganesh is in here, and his wife, and all the characters that I've come to know and love. This is interesting because it's a novella, but it's also specifically under a specific, it was published for a specific program called Quick Reads, which I thought was actually really interesting. And I'm glad that they're doing it. So Quick Reads, let's see, where did I see what this was about? Oh, here we go. Quick reads are brilliant, short, new books written by best-selling writers. They are perfect for regular readers wanting a fast and satisfying read, but they are also ideal for adults who are discovering reading for pleasure for the first time. Since Quick Reads was founded in 2006, over 4.5 million copies of more than 100 titles have been sold and distributed. So yeah, I just think that's cool, and it's part of the Reading Agency, which is a charity inspiring people of all ages and backgrounds to read for pleasure and empowerment. So yeah, that was awesome. So that was a great quick little read. I read that in one sitting and it was really fun. Okay, and then a buddy read that I did with Naomi from Naomi's Bookshelf. This is Year of Wonders by Geraldine Brooks, a novel of the plague. Now this one was really interesting to read a novel of the plague of 1666 during a global pandemic, because there were certain elements that I recognized and that at this point in time feel familiar and almost normal. But it's about an actual village in the UK that decided to close itself off, to quarantine itself during the plague. And of course this is a fictionalized story of what happened, but it's based on a real village. And so it's set somewhere, I can't remember where it's set in England, but the kind of the main business in the village is mining, and our main character is Anna Frith, and we kind of see the year of the plague through her eyes. Now this book was interesting because it says right on the front, the tagline is that it's a novel of the plague, and that's true to an extent. But it's actually more of a novel of Anna and a couple of other main characters, because, and I don't know if this is, I guess this could be a spoiler, I'll put spoiler on the bottom if you haven't read this, is that at the very end, we don't actually get to hear about the recovery of the village, because Anna ends up leaving the village and we follow her. And we don't ever find out, kind of like, we don't get that satisfying conclusion of what happens in the village itself after the plague is over. There was an interesting part I wanted to read. The pastor of the village has encouraged them to quarantine themselves, and then at some point when plague victims start to rise, he realizes that they shouldn't be meeting in the church anymore, that they need to distance themselves from each other. And so this is what he says. There were moans as he spoke from the people scattered in the church. Someone started weeping. As he said he must close the church, Mr. Montpellier began weeping too, his exhaustion making his tears invincible. Do not despair, he said, struggling to smile. For a church is not a building merely. We shall still have our church, but we will have it in the midst of God's own creation. We will meet and pray together under the ceiling of heaven in Cucklet Delph, where the birds will be our choir, the stones our altar, and the trees our spire. In the Delph, friends, we may stand at safe distance from one another so that the ill do not infect the well. So I love that there was like social distancing in this book. I thought that was very interesting. This was originally written in 2001, so it's 20 years ago, and I just find it so fascinating. There's so many parallels, like of them trying to understand the plague and how it's passed and all of that. It's so interesting. The characters in here are really, really interesting. It's very well written, but what the other thing that I have to say about this book is there was a part of me that felt like I was reading two different books. For the first, I would say the first 3/4 of the book, I felt like I was reading a story of the plague. And then the last quarter, suddenly, like, just everything happened. The pace picked up. So many things happened right at the very end, and it just kind of felt like two different books. So yeah, I mean, it was a good book and I recommend it. I gave it 3 stars because I was, you know, a little bit surprised by the structure and stuff. But yeah, it was certainly an interesting read, and I really enjoyed doing it as a buddy read with Naomi. It was really fun to be able to talk about it with her. Okay, and then I read Tess Gerritsen's Last to Die. This is part of her Rizzoli and Isles series. So this is a mystery set in Boston, and Rizzoli is a detective on the police force, and Isles is the medical examiner. And this book, at first, when I first started reading this book, I was like, is this Rizzoli and Isles? Or are we suddenly in some kind of superhero world? Because it was about these children who are, there's 3 children that we meet. I mean, they're young teenagers. They are children, but they're young teenagers. And they have, all 3 of them have lost their families to violence. They were the only survivors. And then their foster families that they were with get killed, and they survive that as well. So, I mean, who does that happen to, right? And so they all 3 experience the same thing, where this blonde woman saves them and then disappears, and then all 3 of them end up at this same school, and then it turns out that all the children in that school are victims of a violent past in some way. And so I was like, is this like some kind of superhero book? But it wasn't. It was totally a Rizzoli and Isles, and it was really good. It was really interesting. Of course, Jane Rizzoli is investigating these cases. She puts it together quicker than anybody else, that there's a connection between these three children. And then Dr. Isles, of course, is involved as well. I just really like Tess Gerritsen, and I like these characters. And if this isn't a series that you've tried, I can recommend it. They're fast reads. They're good. They're interesting characters, good mysteries. Okay, and then I read Cold as Ice by Allison Brennan. This is a book that I won in a Goodreads giveaway, and I've never read anything by Allison Brennan before, and this turns out to have been the 17th in a series. And there were times when I felt that as I was reading it, but I also actually had not any problem following the story. There was obviously some character relationships that I didn't fully understand, but she did a really good job of giving me the information I needed to follow this story. And it was actually really good. I read it really quickly. So the main character is an FBI agent. Her name is Lucy Kincaid. And 2 years before this story opens, she had put a girl into juvenile detention for her role in an organized crime syndicate. And Lucy recognizes that this girl is a psychopath, but nobody else really does. Obviously, she's good at manipulating people. And so now that she's 18, Elise has been released from that, and her file has been closed and all of that. And Elise is out for revenge. Meanwhile, Lucy's husband gets arrested for murder. And so it's a plot line that I really enjoy, like that story of the underdogs and of misjustice and striving for the truth to be revealed. I like that kind of storyline. So yeah, I thought it was good. It was well written. I really enjoyed it. It was fast paced. Like I said, I was able to follow who the characters were and their connections to each other. And so yeah, this one was a good read. Okay, and then I read Death Comes to the Nursery, and this is part by Catherine Lloyd. This is part of her Curlin St. Mary series, and I read all the books in the series except for this one, and this one I read sort of out of order because the very last book in the series had come out and I got it as a NetGalley, and this one is the one right before it. So I've kind of read them a little bit out of order. This is a series that I quite enjoy. It's set during the Regency or just after the Regency, so early 1800s. Okay, so Lucy and Robert live in this village of Curlin St. Mary, and Robert Curlin basically owns the village. He owns all the land, and so he's, kind of upper class in the area. And Lucy is the daughter of the village vicar. He's also the son of an earl, so she's like the granddaughter of an earl, so they're a kind of upper class. Anyways, in this book, she's about to have another child, and so they hire another nursery maid to help out, and this is someone who is related to their current nursery maid. She comes from England, not from England, she comes from London, and is very, very beautiful, and Lucy realizes that it might cause some trouble in the village and even amongst her staff, because all of the men on the staff are kind of like following her around with their tongues hanging out, right? and then this nursery maid, what was her name? Polly. And then Polly is found dead, and so then of course Robert and Lucy need to investigate to find out who killed Polly. And it was, yeah, it was really good. I always enjoyed this series, and I was happy to read this one, and now I've read the whole series, and I can highly recommend it. It's a very entertaining historical mystery series. Okay, and then I read the next in my Inspector Singh series by Shamini Flint. This is a deadly Cambodian crime spree. So in this book, Inspector Singh, who works for the Singapore police, gets sent to Cambodia to be an observer for an international war crimes tribunal that's happening in Phnom Penh. So it's about something that had happened 30 years ago in the 70s, and so I was quite young, and I don't remember when all of this happened, but I do remember learning a bit about it in school. And so of course this was when the Khmer Rouge had taken over, and there was I think about 4 years of that regime and the aftermath of that, and the people who had died, and it was a horrible time period. And actually this book was really interesting to learn a little bit more about it, to be reminded of it, and to see kind of the ongoing repercussions of those 4 years. Was really interesting. I really like Inspector Singh. He's a great character because he's such a good detective. But he drives his superiors, or any superior, crazy. But he is really good. And so of course in this one of the witnesses testifying at the trial gets murdered in the courthouse, and so he gets asked to investigate. And it was a really good outing in this series. I quite enjoy it. If you've never tried the Inspector Singh series by Shamini Flint, I can recommend them. They're very entertaining, and in each book he gets sent to a different country. So it's a nice little peek at these countries in that part of the world. So far we've been to Malaysia and Bali and Singapore, and this is the 4th one now in Cambodia. And so yeah, I just really enjoy them. I like her writing style. They're really well paced and very interesting. They are not overly violent at all, but realistic. And yeah, I really enjoy them. Okay, and then another buddy read that I did, this time with Angie from Literary Labors. We read Captain Alatriste by Arturo Perez-Reverte. And this is a book that has been translated from the Spanish by Margaret Sayers Pedden. And this is the first in a series, and I don't think I've ever read anything by this author. And so I used this for my for Spain for my Around the World reading challenge. So that was really fun. This is a historical fiction set in Madrid in the mid 1600s, I want to say. Let's see. Yeah, the mid 1600s. James is on the throne. James the First is on the throne. So early 1600s, 1630 maybe. Anyway, and this was fun. It was very much an adventure story. Like, it kind of has like Three Musketeers vibes a bit. And so Captain Alatriste is a man who fought in the wars for his country, and now he's struggling to find work. And the story's narrated by a young boy, who works for him, and I forget what his name is. He's like 11 or 12, I think. And so Captain Alatriste gets approached for a job, and so he goes, and it's very mysterious about who it is that's asking him to do this job. But the job is to that there are 2 English visitors who are coming to the city, and he is supposed to find them before they get to their destination and attack them and take all their money. and possessions. They're supposed to have some kind of document, is what he's told. And then there is debate amongst these people who are giving him the job about whether he should kill these visitors or just wound them. And of course, it is far more complicated than that, and things don't go right, and the rest of the book is the story of what happens as a result. And it was good. It was pretty interesting. There were, like, the pacing was interesting because it was like, you know, fast-paced, interesting stuff, and then there would be, like, sometimes almost a whole paragraph where the narrator was telling, like, something that had happened in the past, or giving information about Spain, and it really felt like it just slowed right down, and maybe almost too much information all at once, sort of thing, like to kind of like you know, the pacing felt a little bit, yeah. But I enjoyed it, and I would read more from this author. If I can find more from this series, I would read more about Captain Alatriste. He was very interesting. Okay, and then finally, I read another book that was just for, I wanted something lighthearted and funny, and so I read Definitely Not Mr. Darcy by Karen Doornebos. This was, I learned about this book from Becca at Hicks Picks Books, and this one was very entertaining. So this one is about Chloe Parker, who is almost 40. She is divorced with a daughter, and she learns that there is, and she's a huge Jane Austen fan. And she learns that there is a documentary being filmed that she could be part of, where she lives like a person during the Regency time period. And so she goes over to England to be part of this documentary, only to discover too late that it's a reality dating show. But the prize money, it's $100,000 in prize money, and she needs that for her daughter and her business where she's struggling. She runs a letterpress business, which is really interesting. But anyway, but it was very entertaining because, like, it was an authentic dating show, and so it was Regency style dating, and there was, you know, a group of women and a Mr. Darcy character who would send women home at a certain, you know, after invitation ceremonies. So it's exactly like all the reality dating shows you would imagine, except that it's all Regency era and authentic, like that there were no bathrooms. You could only bathe once a week, and everybody shared the bath water, and so it went all by status. So yeah, it was good. It was very entertaining. I did enjoy all the Jane Austen references, definitely. The ending was slightly unsatisfying for me. It very much fit a Jane Austen era, Jane Austen style book, and I was fine with it, but it was just slightly unsatisfying. I was hoping for something just a little bit different, but and I did figure out, like, you know, kind of a bunch of the, say, twists as they were happening, but it was still a very, very entertaining read. So if you want something lighthearted, clean, yeah, basically clean, and the romance part, and if you like Jane Austen, then this might tickle your fancy. So that's what I've been reading recently. Have you read any of these books? I would love to chat with you about them in the comment section down below, and I will see you for another video soon.